I'm standing down at the front and they're way up at the back, and they think I can't see what they're doing. And the classroom is laid out in such a way that I can see exactly what they're doing.
Andrew, it's so great to meet you, and we're so excited to talk about your work and hear your expertise. Mostly on this show, we mostly talk about the law, but when I read your chapter in Company Towns, I was so fascinated by the relationship between space and work, and so I was just dying to ask you about it. By the way, this is one of our graduate students.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice meeting you too. So you're a geographer. What can geography tell us about the workplace?
We can kind of think about the physical layout of an office or a workspace that is designed in many cases to allow managers to have really good visual observation of what their workers are doing. When I was a student, I worked in a factory because I needed money, basically. And that particular factory was laid out so on the factory floor was all of the machinery, but the manager's offices were one story above the factory floor, and they had big glass windows, and they could look out over the factory floor and see exactly what any of us was doing at any given moment in a shift. So some of those kind of what I like to call micro geographies of how spaces are organized can be used to exercise political power.
Can you tell us about how an office layout might tell us something about the social structure of that office?
A typical office may be where you might have a manager sitting at the desk at one side of the office, looking out over a whole office full of secretaries that are busy typing away, in much the same way that when we think about classrooms. Sometimes I laugh a little bit to myself. At the moment, I'm teaching a huge class with about 250 students in it in one of those sort of traditional big lecture theaters. And I'm standing down at the front and they're way up at the back, and they think I can't see what they're doing. And the classroom is laid out in such a way that I can see exactly what they're doing. And there's a reason for that. It was laid out to reinforce the ability of whoever's standing at the front of the lecture hall to be able to exercise control over the classroom.
So when you go into a firehouse, what story does that tell you about the social organization of the firefighting department?
It's all about the trucks. Firehouses are designed around the trucks. The one interesting thing, all of our firehouses have big towers on them. And that's from the days when, after the firefighters had come back from putting out a fire, obviously the fire hoses were wet and they needed to be dried, and they were hung on these very large, I don't know what you call them, hooks, I suppose. And you needed a really tall tower in which to hang out a 100 or a 50-foot long fire hose. So I'm not sure that technically that they need to still do that today. Typically what we do here is we use that to put a big clock in them.
Oh, wow. It's like vestigial.
It is. It's vestigial. And but with having a big clock there, it also then kind of speaks to the public about a sense of time. In medieval Europe, once clocks had been invented, was the way in which they started appearing on all sorts of public buildings. And a number of historians have said, well, this was part of providing clocks in public spaces to encourage a sense of time discipline amongst the workforce before people had personal, watches.
How would you describe the design preferences of authoritarian regimes in how they organize space?
Well, I mean, probably the classic example there is Nazi Germany. And, they were really, the Nazis were really good at their use of designing public space to get people to think about the world in certain ways. So what they would do is they would often have rallies at night. So they would be in these big spaces that could accommodate thousands of people, but as a way to create a sense of intimacy and kind of bonding amongst the individuals, they would take these aircraft searchlights and they would turn them on, and they would have the beam going straight up into the sky, almost as if it was kind of creating a column of light that would then kind of surround the people in the stadium or wherever they were having their rally. And so it gave a sense of enclosure. And so I've read several interviews by people who had attended some of those rallies in the 30s, and they said by creating that sense of enclosure and kind of concentratedness, it really gave the sense that the speaker was speaking to me personally as an individual, even though I was one of thousands of people in the stadium.
This is the one burning question I saved till the end. What do you think of open plan offices?
It would probably drive me crazy, because if I want to get some serious writing, some serious thinking done, I'm more of a kind of a solitary person. But at the same time, if I were in a really monotonous job that I hated, I could imagine open plan offices would be kind of fun, because you can have a lot of time to do things other than work. The one problem is, of course, is you've probably got the boss keeping an eye on you to a greater extent than if the boss has to stick his or her head through the door to actually find out whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.